The soft hum of machines filled the sterile white hospital room. Grandpa James lay motionless, eyes barely open, a faint beeping from the heart monitor being the only signal that he was still holding on. Tubes ran from his thin arms, and his once vibrant face looked tired, worn, and abandoned. Ethan adjusted the chair beside the bed, sitting down with a warm container of chicken broth he had brought from home. "I made it just the way you like, Grandpa," he whispered, carefully helping him sip a spoonful. James blinked slowly, his only way of expressing gratitude now. A weak smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It had been 2 weeks since James had a stroke. In all that time, not a single other family member had shown up. No calls. No flowers. No visits. Ethan had waited at first. Surely his father, Alan, or his Uncle Bruce would come. But silence filled the void where love should have been. Ethan spoke softly as he wiped James's mouth. "You raised them better than this. You deserved better." His voice cracked, anger simmering beneath his calm. Nurse Caroline stepped in, checking the 4. She offered Ethan a sad smile. "He's lucky to have you, sweetheart. Most patients in this ward, well, they don't get visitors once their families realize it's not convenient. It's heartbreaking." Ethan clenched his fists. He gave them everything. Paid their college tuitions, bought them their first cars, bailed them out of debt, everything. Now, he can't even get a phone call. Caroline sighed. "That's how it goes. People remember the money, not the man." As the nurse left, Ethan picked up a small photo album. He flipped through pages of birthdays, fishing trips, and Sunday dinners, when the family still smiled, before greed eroded gratitude. Each photo stung like a knife. In one, Ethan as a child was sitting on Grandpa's shoulders. Another showed James hugging Alan after buying him his first house. He paused at a photo of Bruce and James shaking hands over the opening of Bruce's auto business, funded entirely by Grandpa's savings. All those smiles, now fake memories. Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out a small recorder. He pressed the red button. "Grandpa, I don't know if you'll get to say what you feel, but I'll make sure your truth is heard." He carefully held it near James's lips. The old man blinked, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. His lips moved slowly. A whisper, raspy and faint, escaped. "Thank you." Ethan held back his own tears. "No, Grandpa. Thank you. You were the only real man in this family. You showed me what love means." As the sun dipped beyond the window, casting long shadows across the room, Ethan tucked the blanket around Grandpa and sat beside him. The machines beeped steadily. The hallway remained empty. No one came. But Ethan stayed. And that made all the difference. The sky was a dull gray the morning of Grandpa James's funeral, clouds thick with the kind of weight that mirrored Ethan's heart. He stood near the casket, dressed in a black suit that hung just a little too loose on his slender frame. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. He had no tears left to shed. Only 3 days had passed since Grandpa James had taken his final breath, Ethan holding his hand as it grew cold. The church pews were nearly empty, only a few elderly neighbors from the old neighborhood, a couple of nurses from the hospital, and the funeral director. The absence of family echoed louder than the soft organ music. Until the doors opened. Alan and Bruce strolled in, their wives at their sides, dressed in black like actors in a bad play. Their children followed, scrolling on their phones, barely glancing at the casket. Ethan's jaw tightened. Not a word from them in weeks. No calls during Grandpa's final hours. But the moment news of the death hit the family group chat, suddenly they showed up. Alan walked up to the front row like it belonged to him. "Sorry we're late," he muttered with a self-satisfied smile. "Had to get Marla's dress steamed." Bruce nodded toward Ethan. "Nice service, kid. Grandpa would have liked it. You know, he always said I was his favorite." Ethan didn't respond. He turned his eyes back to the closed casket. The pastor began to speak, offering gentle, kind words about James's life. Ethan noticed Alan nudging his wife and whispering behind his hand. Bruce yawned during the eulogy. But when it came time for personal reflections, both Alan and Bruce sprang to their feet. Alan walked to the podium, pulling out a folded piece of paper. My father was a man of honor. He loved his family, even when we didn't deserve it. He believed in forgiveness, in hard work, and above all, family unity. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Unity? Alan hadn't visited once. Bruce followed. Dad built everything with his bare hands. He taught us to value strength and leadership. He meant the world to us. His voice cracked, but Ethan could see right through it. Fake grief. Marla sniffled. He was the glue. Now who'll hold the family together? The hypocrisy was overwhelming. After the service, during the small reception at the funeral home, the conversations quickly shifted from grief to assets. I heard the old man had a sizable savings, Bruce muttered, sipping wine. Yeah, Alan replied. The house is paid off, and that land he bought near the lake, that's worth a fortune now. Marla chimed in. He didn't mention anything to me, but I'm sure we'll all get our fair share. Ethan stood in the corner, listening. Not one of them had asked how James had spent his final days. Not one had thanked Ethan for being there. As the murmurs grew louder, Ethan glanced toward the door. Mr. Donovan, Grandpa's longtime lawyer, stepped in. He adjusted his glasses, then spoke clearly. The will reading will be held tomorrow morning at my office. I suggest you all be on time. Suddenly, the room fell silent, and Ethan smiled. The next morning, the air inside Mr. Donovan's law office was thick with tension. Leather chairs squeaked as people shifted in their seats, Alan tapping his fingers impatiently on the oak table, Bruce whispering to his wife, and Marla adjusting her pearl necklace every 2 minutes. Their adult children sat nearby, eyes glued to their phones, barely hiding their boredom. Ethan sat quietly across the table, his face unreadable, but his stomach was in knots. He remembered every moment in that hospital room, every tear Grandpa James had shed in silence. Today, it was time for truth. Mr. Donovan, a gray-haired man with a calm but commanding voice, cleared his throat and opened a thick envelope. Thank you all for coming, he began. Mr. James Whitmore's last will and testament was prepared under full legal authority, with notarized witnesses and, he glanced at Ethan, a personal recording, per his request. Alan scoffed. A recording? He could barely talk. Mr. Donovan gave him a sharp look. He was of sound mind. His words were clear, and it was all done within legal rights. He pressed a button on a small speaker. Grandpa James's voice crackled to life, frail but firm. If you're hearing this, then I'm no longer here. I've lived a full life, but my last days opened my eyes to a painful truth. When I needed my family the most, only one person stood by me. Everyone froze. Alan's jaw twitched. Bruce sat forward. To my sons, Alan and Bruce, you were given everything. Homes, businesses, second chances. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because I believed in you. But when I fell ill, you vanished. Not a call. Not a visit. I waited every day for your voices. They never came. Marla shifted uncomfortably, already sensing where this was headed. To you, I leave nothing. Not out of revenge, but out of clarity. You already had your share. You just didn't value it. Gasps echoed in the room. Alan slammed his hand on the table. What kind of manipulation? Donovan raised a hand. Let him finish. To Ethan, my grandson, who sat by my bed every day, who fed me when I couldn't eat, who gave me dignity when I had none, I leave my house, my savings, the lake property, and everything I have. You reminded me what love looks like. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Bruce looked as though he'd been slapped. Marla was already turning red. Alan stood up. This is insane. He was old and confused. This is elder abuse. Mr. Donovan opened a folder. All medical records confirm James Whitmore had full mental clarity. And this document was signed, witnessed, and filed weeks before his passing. Bruce shot a glare at Ethan. You manipulated him. You stole our legacy. Ethan, calm and steady, replied, No. I just showed up. Something none of you bothered to do. Alan leaned in, teeth clenched. We'll fight this in court. Mr. Donovan smiled politely. You're welcome to try. But I assure you you'll lose. For the first time, Ethan saw fear on their faces. Not because they'd lost money, but because they'd been exposed. The truth wasn't in the will. It had been in their choices all along. Bruce's chair screeched loudly as he shot up, fists clenched and face beet red. "You think we're just going to let this go?" he barked. Dad was not in his right mind when he signed that paper. "This is fraud." Marla stood behind him, arms crossed, her voice dripping with venom. "You were always the quiet one, Ethan. Who knew you'd turn out to be so sneaky?" Ethan stayed seated, unshaken. "I didn't manipulate anyone. I just sat with him while the rest of you pretended he didn't exist." Alan threw his arms up. He was a bitter old man. "You think he'd just cut off his own sons unless someone poisoned his mind against us?" Mr. Donovan calmly stacked the will papers. "Your father documented everything. Hospital records show he was mentally sound. And we have video footage of Ethan bringing him meals, reading to him, being his only visitor. There's nothing you can do." Bruce pointed a trembling finger at Ethan. "You tricked a dying man and took what should have been ours." Ethan stood now, his voice rising, not in anger, but in conviction. "You want to talk about what's fair? Fair would have been you showing up at the hospital once, just once, to say goodbye. Fair would have been treating him like a father, not a wallet." Alan turned to Mr. Donovan. "We're taking this to court." "You're welcome to," the lawyer replied smoothly. "But you'll waste thousands in legal fees and lose in the end. Everything was done by the book." Marla stepped forward, fake tears in her eyes. "Ethan, come on. Be reasonable. We're family. Can't you share a little? We're struggling. Where were you when he couldn't feed himself?" Ethan shot back. "When I had to lift him out of bed alone. You didn't even send a card." Bruce's son, still scrolling his phone, muttered, "This is getting boring. Can we go?" Bruce rounded on him. "Shut up, Cody. This is our future he's stealing." "No," Ethan said quietly. "It was never yours to begin with. You just assumed you'd get it. That's the difference." Alan, red-faced and breathing heavily, stormed toward the door. "This isn't over." Marla muttered something under her breath, pulling her husband by the arm as they left. Bruce lingered at the door. "You'll regret this," he said bitterly. Ethan met his eyes. "The only thing I regret is that Grandpa had to die thinking his sons didn't love him." The office door slammed shut behind them. For the first time since the funeral, the room was peaceful. Mr. Donovan exhaled and handed Ethan a folder. "Your grandfather wanted you to have everything, not because of blood, but because of loyalty." Ethan nodded, quietly overwhelmed. Outside the office, Alan and Bruce climbed into their luxury SUV, fuming. "We'll drag this brat through the mud," Bruce hissed. But inside, Ethan sat in stillness. The money didn't matter as much as the truth finally being heard. And for Grandpa James, justice had been served. A week had passed since the chaotic will reading, and Ethan hadn't heard a word from Alan, Bruce, or the rest of the family. No angry voicemails. No legal notices. Just silence. He stood alone in front of Grandpa James's house, the one that now legally belonged to him. The paint was fading, the porch creaked, and the yard needed work. But to Ethan, it wasn't just property. It was a legacy. He stepped inside and inhaled deeply. The scent of old books, pipe tobacco, and faint traces of lavender soap still lingered in the air. Every corner of the house whispered memories. The kitchen table where they used to play chess. The back porch, where Grandpa shared stories about the war. The old recliner where he'd fall asleep with a book open on his chest. Ethan walked slowly to the mantel and lifted a photo frame. It was a picture of him at age 6, sitting on Grandpa's shoulders, both of them grinning under a bright summer sky. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. He had made a promise to Grandpa before he passed, and it was time to keep it. Over the next few days, Ethan began repairing the home. He cleaned out the attic, painted the peeling walls, and donated Grandpa's old clothes to the local shelter. With part of the inheritance, he hired a contractor to fix the roof and update the heating system. He wasn't flipping the house or putting it on the market, he was preserving it. But that wasn't all. Ethan contacted the hospital where Grandpa had spent his last weeks. He set up a small trust fund in his name, the James Whitmore Compassion Fund, a donation program to provide care packages and companionship to elderly patients without visitors. He also bought new reclining chairs for the geriatric wing, along with a set of books and a few old record players, just like the ones Grandpa used to love. Nurse Caroline, the one who had helped Grandpa during those lonely days, cried when she saw the dedication plaque. "He would have been so proud of you, Ethan," she said. Meanwhile, Alan and Bruce tried stirring trouble on social media, posting vague quotes about greedy manipulators and family betrayal. They sent a few passive-aggressive texts to Ethan. One even asked for just a little loan, for old time's sake. Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. He had chosen peace over petty. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast an amber glow across the newly painted porch, Ethan sat with a warm cup of tea and placed the photo of Grandpa beside him. "You're home now," he whispered. The wind rustled the leaves gently, like a quiet thank you. In the end, Ethan didn't just inherit property or money. He inherited purpose, a legacy of love, loyalty, and truth. And the ones who had chased riches? They were left with nothing but the weight of their own choices.